By selecting these maritime targets, these shipping targets, what the Navy did very wisely was to paralyze the Pakistan Army's modes of transport and communication, and the ability to move soldiers and ammunition and arms from one part of the country to the other, and that's where the naval commandos came in. You're looking at an all-of-government approach, and there were no excuses like it can't be done, or we don't have the equipment for it, or we don't have the manpower. They just went with what they had, and they just went on improvising. And I think that is the terrific spirit of the 1971 war, is the fact that here you have a country that's been dismissed as an economic basket case, punching way above its weight in international geopolitics, and that actually creates another country in its neighborhood, and defeats virtually two superpowers, China and the United States, that are working in sync. And Pakistan, of course, being the main theater. So literally, you're fighting three countries. You have the backing of a third superpower, the Soviet Union. And this all-of-government approach is something that's so remarkable. And it starts at the very at the topmost level, where you had the government of India, which is which had this policy of non-alignment, which actually goes and signs a treaty of peace and friendship with the Soviet Union. Which is not a military alliance, but it just stops short of being a military alliance, and it basically tells the Indian government that they have the backing of the Soviet Union if things were to go, as they say, southwards. And this is exactly what happened. They not only improvised at the geopolitical level, but also at the tactical level, which is where my book comes in. They did not have limpet mines in the numbers that they wanted. And now a limpet mine is nothing but a magnetized explosive charge, which has a very powerful magnet on one side, and it's got an explosive on the other, and that fits on the side of a ship, and is designed to explode after a certain period of time. And this is the capability that the Navy did not have at that point, but they worked on it very rapidly. The very bright people in naval ordnance, the engineers sat and improvised these limpet mines, and they came up with this very unique delay mechanism, the delayed fuse mechanism that you mentioned. And it was someone's bright idea at that point to actually coat that fuse, it was a soluble plug, which meant that once the limpet mine was fixed on the side of a ship, the plug would dissolve in the water, the firing circuit would be completed, and the limpet mine would explode. Somebody came up with this idea to coat that soluble plug with a condom, which would delay the explosion by at least half an hour, which would give the swimmer, the saboteur, time to swim away. So it was actually designed keeping the safety of the Bengali commandos in mind. And it was a brilliant plan, and it's just that little thing that, it was a cherry on top, if you can call it that. And this again is, the whole spirit of the Indian Armed Forces, the government, and indeed the Indian Navy in 1971 was all about improvising and fighting with what you had rather than with what you wanted.
Yeah, that's a lovely, improvisation, which is one that actually wins wars. In firstly, finding the right youth to train them, and turn them into diving is one of the toughest. I'm a trained commando in the sense, but we definitely know deep sea divers and ones who can go into water are really tough, and to train them into these to perform these kind of precision tasks where you deliver, you know exactly where to put them. It's very scientific. You can't just put a limpet mine on some part of it. You need to put it at the right place.
That's correct, yeah. So that's why they looked for, youth who kind of were technically trained, the college students who understood all these nuances. So it's a very, a scientific task, if you can call it that, to swim, in different medium. You have to actually cross, you have to be physically fit, you have to do cross-country runs, get to the water, then swim in the water, not be disoriented, plant all the explosives. And it sounds very simple, and but it's a very, very tough operation, and it's full marks to the Navy and Captain Samant and all those people who made this fantastic operation come to life.
His predictions also, like he had predicted about 20% casualties. I don't think it met that target also, in the sense it speaks very highly about the training. And there were some defectors in the sense who didn't perform, but overall they did a fantastic job. You said about 100,000 tons of shipping.
100,000 tons of enemy shipping that they sank between August and November of 1971. They paralyzed very large parts of the waterways, like you mentioned. East Pakistan then was a riverine country, and you needed boats, steamers, ships to move from one part of the country to the other. It's just like waterways, like you have roadways, you have waterways in what is today Bangladesh. And by selecting these maritime targets, these shipping targets, what the Navy did very wisely was to paralyze the Pakistan Army's modes of transport and communication, and the ability to move soldiers and ammunition and arms from one part of the country to the other. And that's where the naval commandos came in.
It was a spectacular work actually, because like Napoleon said, the army marches on its stomach. Logistics is what defines how the army marches.
There's a French word for this. It's called commerce destruction, guerre de course, which is not very, it's not very frequently mentioned in naval terminology, but it actually means that destroying the commerce, the maritime commerce routes of the enemy, to kind of deny him sustenance, is to attack what you mentioned, the fact that the army marches on its stomach. So you had here the naval saboteurs attacking the sea lanes of communication, merchant ships that were coming in with food and ammunition for the Pakistan army, or taking out exports, the jute and tea that was getting the military dictatorship foreign exchange, for instance, what they needed most in 1971. It was denying them that. So it was a very, very well thought of strategy, and it tells you again the fact that navies don't exist to fight distant wars in oceans. They have to fight wars that influence the course of the land battle. And here you see this aspect coming out in spectacular form, where you had every naval action was something that influenced the battle on land, and every ship that was sunk meant that the Pakistani military had fewer bullets to shoot at the Indian army or the Bangladeshis. They had lesser food to survive and hold out against the Indian armed forces. And this again points to what a brilliant campaign, that this was a war of a very different dimension that they were fighting even before formal declaration of hostilities had begun.
And you also mentioned about, it'll be important for us to also introduce our readers and viewers about the role played by the Bangladesh. There's Colonel Osmani, whom you talked about, who came and gave a pep talk to those soldiers. And can you give a mention about all the others who were part of the naval component of this?
Absolutely. And I would be remiss in mentioning the fact that but for the Bangladeshi people and the military and the civilians, none of these operations could have actually happened, because you had the Indian Navy standing away from the borders of East Pakistan, sending in the naval commandos in to do all the fighting. The actual fighting was, let's not forget, done by the naval commandos of Bangladesh, and they did a spectacular job. They've put their lives on the line to carry out these operations, and they did it at a great personal risk, not only to their lives, but also to the lives of their families who were left behind in East Pakistan, their friends. You had cases, right after the attack on Chittagong on the 15th of August, you had an entire village that was destroyed because it had sheltered some of these naval commandos. I mean, that is the kind of high stakes game that the Bangladeshi people were, up against, because I think they had figured that they had nothing more to lose. They were anyway being wiped out brutally by the Pakistani military, and this is when they decided, they had their backs to the wall and they decided to fight, and what a spectacular campaign they fought.